Recently, my dad and I were scouting a pretty remote old dirt road, which was pretty far away from any other campgrounds. People had made campsites little more than a clear patch on the thick forest floor really, a little ways off the road here and there. We found a few of them, one of which had cocaine and condoms strewn about it. We eventually found a nice one though, and decided since it was getting dark already that we camped there for the night. After I set up my hammock, I decided to go and get some firewood. Eventually, I came upon a small clearing with a single dead tree in it. I started hacking off the branches with my knife. As I was chopping at the wood though, I started to hear footsteps out in the woods. It was way too quiet to be a bear or some other similar type of animal. I thought that maybe it was an elk or a wolf perhaps. I kept on hacking away. The thing is though, I started to notice I would only ever hear the footsteps while I was chopping, but as soon as I stopped, they would stop immediately. And that's when I said, man, screw this. I'll just take the wood I already have and start heading back. I began to hear more footsteps all around as I started my way back though. The forest was so thick that I couldn't see anything out there. If you've been to coastal BC, you'll know what I mean. I had left my machete in my hammock, and the walk back to camp with these footsteps following me was the most unnerving 15 minutes I'd had in a long time. We were far enough away from civilization that we couldn't head back right away either, so I had to sleep with my machete and my knife in either hand that night. Needless to say, it was a very restless sleep. At least I had enough firewood to cook a few bratwursts though. Eventually, we made it back just fine, but I never figured out what those footsteps in the woods really were. I went camping with a group of friends on some public land that I knew quite well. I spent a lot of time out there trail riding and camping most weekends for about 3 years or so. We set up camp at a spot we had used a few times. We had partied with other people at this spot on multiple occasions. This trip there were 6 of us there, and 4 of my friends decided to go to a party. This trip there were 6 of us there, and 4 of my friends decided to go to a party we found out about while on the trails earlier in the day. I was tired from digging my Jeep out of a sand washout though, that I'd had no business driving into anyway. I have to admit it did look pretty cool for the 2 minutes until I got really stuck. Anyways, my friend's girlfriend decided to stay back at camp with me, while everyone else left for the party. We watched the fire die down and listened to the animals outside. I won't lie, I did get a bit of a kick out of her being afraid of the coyotes making noise on the other side of the swamp. I assured her it was fine though. They wouldn't really bother with us at all. After a bit, we got into our sleeping bags, but just as I was starting to doze off, she suddenly asked me, "Did you hear that?" I just ignored her and tried to fall asleep. A minute or 2 later though, she sat up and asked me again. I responded that I didn't hear anything and to go to sleep. Then though, not even a minute later, I began to hear what sounded like an ice cream truck slowly driving down the trail we were on. This trail was one way in or out, about 3 miles long and ended in only a clearing. We were camped within 1/4 of a mile of the entrance/exit. We also went to the end of the trail after we ate dinner, and there was not anyone on it then. No one had driven past us either. I didn't hear the noise of the engine, only the creepy ice cream music moving past us. Not to mention the trail was a ruddy mess, so even a vehicle with a reasonably quiet exhaust would be revving high enough to be heard throughout the woods. I didn't tell her this though, because I didn't want to scare her even more. It sure scared the crap out of me though. When she asked if I heard it another time, and I did, I instead suggested we jump in the Jeep and go to the party the other guys were at. Even though I was tired, I slept on a raggedy couch next to a bonfire in a sand pit. Much better in my opinion than being hounded by some creepy ice cream truck in the woods all by ourselves. Not sure if this counts as scary really, but I was a wildland firefighter in Yarnell. My crew was almost sent at around the same time as the 19 firefighters that died there, but we weren't sent until a few hours later. When we got there, that's when we learned that all those firefighters had passed away. That night, we were sleeping in the desert. Many of us don't like tents, so we just made do with tarp on the ground and slept on a bag on top of it. Anyway, I was awoken by a horrible wind. It was a very powerful one that blew sand and bugs against everything so hard that it actually hurt. I pulled the sleeping bag over my head to shut out the wind and sand. About half an hour later, there was a huge alarm and a lot of people running this way and that. I popped out and saw everybody was piling into the vehicle. Knowing that the fire wasn't far away and the wind was crazy, I took no chances. I rushed into the vehicle and we all left right then and there. As I turned to look back at where we had just been, I could see the fire was already not too far away from where we were. And within just a few moments, it was fully caught ablaze. That was not a pleasant night. Another time, we were working very deep in a forest where you literally wonder if you're the first human in the area. We were on night shift and were supposed to stand apart by 50 yards and watch the fire in the distance. By that time, I was quite used to being in dark forests. I had become comfortable with it because I knew there was nothing nearby that would be a threat to me. So when I saw something moving in the dark about 20 feet away, I didn't really think that much of it. I was eager to see what animal this was though. I turned my light on, and the first thing I saw was an upside-down triangular face and massive ears with huge glowing eyes. The face looked rather gray due to the light and ashes. This all happened within a span of 5 seconds, but to me it felt like forever. For a moment, my heart nearly stopped, as I thought I was seeing a goblin or something. I kept telling myself, no, you aren't crazy. This isn't a goblin. That's not what you're looking at. Just as I was about to try and decide whether to scream for the nearest guys to come help me, I saw the creature move more and realized it was just a fawn covered in ashes. So yeah, that's a couple of my stories right there. My husband and I went camping with some of our buddies. We sat around drinking until about 2-ish a.m. We were in northern Michigan and we were at a campsite, but we were far from other campers. You would have to drive a car to get to our campsite because we were way out there from everyone else. Anyways, we all get into our tents and pass out. Everyone else was asleep, but I woke up around 3-ish with a sudden urge to pee. I decided not to bring the lantern with me because I didn't want to wake everyone else up. I stumbled pretty far out and popped a squat. It was pitch black in the area I was. I couldn't even see my hand in front of my face because it was such a cloudy and dark night. As I was finishing up, I started to hear footfalls behind me, creeping up on me. I had my back towards the woods, but I could tell it did not sound like any animal I knew. I suddenly had this sick feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I booked it back into my tent to be with the company of the others. I then laid there quietly and listened to these footsteps follow me back and walk around our tent for quite a while. Then they just walked off into the night. I went to check when daylight broke, but I still have no idea what it was, nor did I want to find out that night. Last year, I took a trip in my Nissan Altima from Prescott, Arizona to New Orleans. To make a long story short, my ex-girlfriend, who was a tattoo artist, was being sued by a guy she had once inked, apparently over an injury he had sustained during the session. She asked me to come as a witness on her behalf, as I had been there the night in question. The trip was scheduled to take me between 20 and 22 hours driving along Route 40 East. I popped in my headphones, tossed my bag in the front seat, and started driving before the newspapers had even been delivered. It should be noted that the Altima was a two-door coupe, and the only access to the back seat was by folding the two front seats forward. Rarely did I ever have more than one person in the car. I could hardly ever place anything in the back seat either, lest most of the time I completely forget it even existed. The first part of my trip went smoothly. Traffic was alright, the weather was fine as well, and my playlist was keeping me entertained. Yes, I know it might seem a bit strange that I listen to my music through headphones while driving, instead of using the radio, but that's just how I chose to relax. My first pit stop was in New Mexico, where I refueled and grabbed a bite to eat. Afterwards, I got back in my car, popped my headphones back in, and continued on my way east. Upon returning to the car, though, I noticed a stale taste in the air, but I dismissed it as a lingering scent from the restaurant. I'd driven for maybe another hour or so when I decided to pull over on the side of the road. I had to make a quick phone call, and I had to take a piss anyway by that point too. I was in Texas now, on a long stretch of highway that was pretty much desert in every direction. I stepped out of the car and stretched my legs. I took a discreet leak behind a bush, then called my ex to make her aware of my progress on my journey. I also dropped a quick voicemail to my boss. Keep in mind this whole time, I was pacing along the side of the road. Ultimately though, I was still facing my car. There was no one around, and even though every half minute or so, another car would pass by, nobody stopped for any reason before I got back into my car. I put my earbuds back in and closed the driver's side door. I started my car and fired up the AC. I was just shifting the car into drive when I heard my passenger door slam shut. My heart leapt into my throat, and I tore my earbuds out immediately. I looked over to my right. The front seat was pushed forward, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed someone walking away from my car. I yelled out, "What the hell?" I spun around in my seat, immediately power locking all my doors. The person walking away from my vehicle was a short, disheveled man with thinning hair, a jeans jacket, and no shirt on underneath, maybe about 50 years old or so. I watched him in my rearview mirror, staggering around like he was drunk. He walked right into the middle of the road, where he stopped, bent over, then vomited all over the pavement. That's when I noticed he was wearing corduroy pants and blue Crocs. He wiped his mouth and turned to look at me. His mouth was kind of lopsided, and he was missing a few teeth as well. I could hear him trying to say something to me, but I could barely make it out from inside the car. I dialed 911 and gave the operator an estimate of where this guy was and that he'd tried to get into my car. I watched as the guy began to wander off into the desert, hanging off the belt on his back. I noticed one of those leather pouches employees keep utility knives in. I told the operator he had a knife and drove off swiftly after. Whatever was going on here, I didn't really want to get involved and get potentially stabbed. I was so shaken up by this that I didn't stop again until I was running on fumes, playing in my head over and over again about how that guy had gotten so close to my car without me noticing. Where had he even come from? The next time I stopped for gas was when it finally hit me. I didn't smoke, but there was an empty cigarette pack in my back seat. That's why the stale taste had been in the air. He had been lying in my back seat ever since I left New Mexico, and I hadn't even noticed. When the door slammed, he had not been trying to get in. He had been getting out. I had been listening to my earbuds the entire time, and I hadn't heard or noticed anything because of this. He could have stabbed me at any point, and I would have never seen it coming. I'm not sure what was wrong with him for him to be staggering about like that, but whatever happened, thank goodness he didn't decide to hurt me, and that he simply got out of my car instead. I'm glad I also didn't end up transporting him all the way to my destination. I never found out what happened to him, or what he wanted. I never tell this story to anyone, because most people find it very hard to believe. They assume I'm just messing with them, and truly, I wish that I was. I haven't listened to my earbuds in the car since then. Me and my friends have camped out at Mount Charleston in Nevada a lot of times before, and walked in the dead of night into the pitch darkness to tell each other scary stories. On this day though, we weren't camping, we just wanted to enjoy the view and play in the snow a bit. We pulled over on the road. While we were all talking and having fun though, we heard a growl and some footsteps in a bush nearby. We had heard that mountain lions were all over these roads. I had never seen one personally, but I'd had friends who had. We all got scared, because normally when we were out in the woods, we'd have guns or knives or machetes on us, but this time we didn't have anything. We ran as fast as we could back to our car, hearing whatever this was following behind us. While everyone else was hopping inside, I found out that my door was still locked, so I had to climb in through the window of another door. I even accidentally kicked the cute girl I had a crush on right in the face. She was mad and we were all scared. As we all piled in, we saw a big cat emerge from the brush. Needless to say, we got out of there as fast as we could, and whenever we decided to go in the future, we brought all our equipment with us just in case. In 2009, I went on a trip to the Tiputini Research Facility in the rainforest of Ecuador as part of a tropical rainforest ecology course I took in university. We had been out on a hike all afternoon and were headed back to the station shortly after 1800. For those of you who don't know, on the equator the sun rises at 0600 and sets at 1800 pretty much every single day. It was quite dark now, and given the canopy cover, we were relying on our headlights and our guide to get back to the facility. As we were going along, I kept on hearing this strange noise coming from above us and slightly behind us. I wasn't too worried though, because there were lots of monkeys in the area. It was probably just observing us, and our guide didn't seem too concerned either. Once we got back to the camp though, I asked our guide privately about the noises. He explained to me that a jaguar had been waiting there for one of us to fall behind. He'd heard it too, but didn't start to freak out because then the group may have begun to panic as well, and that would have made things much worse. Needless to say, I stayed away from the tree line after dark after that. Jaguars aren't known to typically attack humans, but sometimes they do, and I wouldn't want to meet one in the dark in a heavily forested area, especially if I'd fallen behind. My scariest experience was with lightning while hiking through the Colorado Trail in, you guessed it, Colorado. The trail was about 500 miles long through a range of terrain in the Rocky Mountains. I'm 99% certain I spotted and then lost sight of a mountain lion at some point, which was unnerving. Several times I was rather freaked out by some aggressive bulls when passing through herds of free-range cattle. That was scary too. But the scariest I have a good chance of dying here shit was being in wide open areas in the middle of an intense thunderstorm. The worst was on what I think was a snow mesa. The mesa is miles across at an elevation of around 12,000 feet, mostly flat and essentially treeless. As I was moving through, there were small scattered thunderstorms quickly developing as I was crossing the area, and as a result there was a lot of lightning. For those of you who don't know, in areas with a lot of valleys or high elevation, the weather is very unpredictable, and lightning strikes happen quite often. The trail across this area was 3 miles long, and there was nowhere to take cover. There were storms all around me, perhaps half a mile away or less, producing lightning strikes every few seconds. There were numerous storms like this, moving all around. It was so surreal. The part of the trail I was walking down could be in bright sunlight, while I watched storms move all around me just a short distance away. I had to slow down or speed up my pace to try and time my way through the paths of these storms. I ended up closer to the edge of some of them than I really wanted to be. There were some really close calls with the lightning strikes, close enough for my hair to get tingly, and for me to even smell some of it burning. It was scary being so exposed out there, being able to see tens of lightning strikes per minute around me. That was one of those I fucked up bad moments. A long-ass moment that lasted 30 to 45 minutes until I finally emerged from that deadly area.